What's going on, everybody? Salty Sea Gaming here, otherwise known as Karl Franz of Easy Company. Welcome to part 2 of my series on how to squad lead. Alright, so, very important. This is a very important part. It's going to be about moving to your first contact. Now, there's a reason why it's not moving to the objective. I'm going to explain that later, but you're going to be moving to your first contact. This is going to be slightly biased towards Post Scriptum, and in terms of other attack shooters, it's not going to necessarily apply in every single situation. But I hope that you can use some intuition to divine some good advice from this video series, even if you can't apply them all 100%. You've just spawned in, say like at the objective, say you're in a game of Post Scriptum on the attacker side, and I'll also say that if you're defending and you have like again in Post Scriptum, if you have one of those spawns that are right next to the objective, there are some things in this guide that you might find a little redundant in those circumstances, I should say. But nonetheless, use your intuition, use whatever means of thinking that you have. I assume your brain, and try to apply them accordingly. I mean, this isn't a how-to guide from every single angle. You're gonna have to use your imagination a little bit. I'm just providing the foundations. So saddle up, get in whatever transport you have, and what I want you to do, or what you should be doing rather, because again, use your intuition, is that you should go within marching distance of where you want to set up to make actions against the enemy. Now, the area that you should be setting up should be inconspicuous. It should be not very obvious. Like, the enemy shouldn't be able to just point it out just by looking at the map and being like, right there. Oh, and everybody knows. Oh, it's just right there. So they can. So you can't just have like the whole kitchen sink just tossed right on top of your squad, or right on top of your, in this case, in PostScript, in this case, in MSP, if you do take that. You're going to want it to be within marching distance of the objective and of the areas that you want to set up in order to make actions against the enemy, like I said. It should have a fair amount of cover, like I said, be out of the way, hard to spot. And I have a good example for you about a fob that they set up in one of these games I was in. I forget which map it was exactly. This was in Postscriptum, but essentially it was on the very other side of a bridge, in a house, in a big warehouse. They put down an FOB. Now, I cannot express how bad of an idea this was for two reasons. I'm gonna explain. Cut that out. For one thing, it was in a big warehouse that was on the map, and everybody could spot it. So in no time, we had fire coming on us from crazy everywhere. Like on that one fob, they knew exactly where it was. It was not out of the way at all. It was so. It basically made that area of approach across that bridge, it was a small bridge, like a small bridge made of rubble. It basically made it impossible because they knew where the spawn was. They were able to guess very easily. Everybody was pouring out of there. It was just a nightmare. We didn't have any sort of level of surprise or any level of cover, I guess, from enemy intelligence, for lack of a better word. It was an absolute nightmare, and it basically, I'd say it kind of lost us the game because it lost us a very viable venue of approach against the enemy. You're not going to want to do this. You're going to want to have your spawns. You're going to have you're going to want to have your rallies in cover, away from enemy action, behind buildings, in some buildings that are out of the way, buildings that they wouldn't necessarily suspect, or it's not plainly obvious that you're coming from there. You're going to want to have a good buffer between you and the enemy in terms of what they can see and what you can see. Sort of more on sort of sight and vision and intelligence later. Obviously, communication is key, so you're going to want to let your team, the rest of your platoon, usually it's the platoon size that does these attack shooters, you're going to want to let the rest of the platoon and the commander, if there is a commander in that kind of game that you're playing, you're going to want to let them know that you're going to be taking this here, and let the other squads know that you're going to be setting up in this area for actions against the enemies, so that they either stay away or know to, or rather just know that you're there, so if they do need to make a rotation your way to give you support, that they can actually do that and do it well, without, having the enemy just know right away that that's what you're doing, or right away that that's what they're doing. This is going to be spoken very specifically in the context of Post Scriptum. So pay attention and acknowledge that, and again, try to translate it in the best of ways to whatever attack shooter that you have at your disposal. So you rallies down. Next thing you do is send out the point men. Send them out. They know who they are. You should have told them who they are. Speak very plainly, very clear and concise orders. Send them out and bring up the rear with your command squad. Have your tasking elements be ready to support. Now, if you can't by now read the maps on in your game, then you're right away you're going to be at a severe disadvantage, because as a squad lead you should be immediately able to tell, like, let's say in your squad you have a mortar man, you should be immediately able to tell that guy, hey, listen, I need rounds of HE 130 meters, 120 meters out that way. Drop a mark to help him, do the calculations, and also to show where he should be facing. You should be able to do this very effortlessly, I should say, or it should be very quick at the very least. The main goal in this phase is to find the enemy. I gotta stress this, very important, because it's very important. You have to find the enemy. He's gonna be around the objective. That the existence of the objective helps in terms of finding him, but you're gonna want to find the enemy. Ugh. Cut out that whole area. Hold on, I'm gonna do it again. The main goal of this is to find the enemy. It's very important. It's very important that you know where the enemy is before he knows where you are. Now, you should automatically assume that as soon as you see the enemy, that they can see you, or even before that, that the enemy has some kind of vision on you in the first place, as a matter of precaution. But the main goal is to find the enemy. The thing that puts your force, whatever it is, whether it be tanks or infantry, at a severe disadvantage is if they are spotted first. If the enemy can bring to bear munitions against your squad first. You're going to want to bring munitions against the enemy first. You want to make the first strike. You want to be ready to engage, ready to move first. You're going to want to be at maximum ready status first. You're going to want to have every advantage when you find the enemy, and in all the stages before that. Your job as a squad lead in this case is to move and bring up the rear of the advancing infantry. Now, what the advancing infantry are doing are setting up new areas for rallies and areas that you can regroup as an entire squad, let's say if an advance sort of goes awry. Now, again, you're going to want your rally to be fairly out of the way of the enemy. You're going to want your rally to be in a spot that is somewhat inconspicuous. As a squad lead, you are moving and always bring up the rear of your advancing infantry. Now, what your advancing infantry are doing are setting up new spots for new rallies. The previous area that the point men or the advancing infantry go to is going to be the spot where your rally should go. So they should be strategic areas, and they should be moving carefully and conservatively. Now, they do this until first contact, and based on the nature of the contact, everything changes, and you have to go into contact mode, I should say. And let me explain a little bit more. Your goal is to utilize movement and careful advances to do a couple of things. Let me explain what those are. You're going to get ready for initial contact. Make sure that you have every advantage when engaging the enemy. Make your advance hard to spot, and find the enemy. Now, those things aren't going to be necessarily done in that order. Like, there's going to be some things that you have to do first, or you kind of have to jumble those around a bit. But obviously based on circumstances. But as a squad lead, you should be relatively intuitive and be ready to restructure your game plan on the fly. But let me repeat what those things are. You're supposed to get ready for initial contact. Make sure you have every advantage. Make your advance hard to spot, and find the enemy. Notice how none of these have really anything to do with the objective. More on that later, I'll explain. For now, let's break that down even more so you guys understand. Let's start with making your advance harder to spot. Alright, that's a really important one. It's the reason, actually, that we have these fire teams which move semi-independently. It makes it harder for the enemy to draw a distinctive front line of where the enemy's going. Now, I think it was a couple of days ago on a stream, we had one fob in a forest, like it was in like less than 200 meters away from the objective, and there was one venue of approach that the squads that were spawning from it were using all the time, and it was so painful to watch them like barely get a foothold and just get wiped out completely as they'd advance on the point. Now, mind you, that point is hard to assault because there's nothing but open space around it, save for like a forest, which was always crawling with enemy infantry. But they were just rolling as like a blob, and it was just horrendous. Like a like freaking like George, it would put George Douglas MacArthur to freaking tears. It was just so horrendously planned and horrendously set up, the way that they would just move across one tiny area of space and then just get absolutely destroyed on all sides. It was a hopeless effort. This is another thing. We want the enemy to get our force number wrong, so it's harder for them to allocate forces properly to deal with your advance. And that's a very important thing. You're going to want the enemy to always underestimate you, or in some cases, in advanced circumstances, overestimate you. Let's talk about finding the enemy now. So, you want your squad to have access to them near unilateral superiority in terms of scouting. That is to say, it's easy to see the enemy, but hard to be seen by the enemy. Now, fire teams should be watching each other's backs in this case. Move them along and through cover. Tell them, hey, like, go right, go this way. Actually coordinate with the other fire team, rather the point men, to make sure that they move through a place that is not completely devoid of cover. And with your command squad, it's very important that you actually watch their flanks to see from all directions if they could be engaged by enemy or machine guns, especially because machine guns are force multipliers. Make sure that they are not basically in the way of enemy fire from angles that are extremely disadvantageous, I should say. Let's talk about preparing for initial contact. Okay, so when contact occurs, alright, this is very important. Your squad should only engage a force that is flanked, caught out in the open, or in some kind of similar disadvantage, I should say. You can ensure this by having your squad advance in formation. That's a very important thing. That is to say, the command squad advances in the rear of the point men and supports them. Taking positions which are in cover and inconspicuous. So cover, they call this cover and concealment for anybody who's been in the military. And leaving venues of retreat open. That's really important. So, because in case an advance isn't really going too well, or if an engagement isn't going too well, your squad's able to shift their focus around from individual rifleman to individual rifleman, and actually do their jobs effectively in cover without too much danger coming their way in terms of enemy retaliation, I should say. This is actually the reason why you have your rallies down in inconspicuous places, is to allow them to, falling back to the rally point, like, the rally mark, or whatever game that you're using, usually, like, most tac shooters have some sort of like a squad rally point that you can set down. Falling back to the rally point isn't a completely unfeasible option. Like, that's why it should be out of the way. Like, in case your squad does need to fall back to it, then they're actually capable of doing it without coming under intense enemy fire, I should say. Lastly, in an ideal situation, the command squad should be in a position to flank the enemy should the point men be engaged. That's very important. Your command squad should be in a position to lay down very accurate fire on the enemy's flanks as your point men are engaged by them. Now, the enemy should at first only see your point men. That's the important thing. If it sees the command squad, then that's still okay, because your point men can then retaliate, but as the command squad, you should have access to the ability to call out enemies where they're seen, and also lay down marks to ensure that your infantry are aware of where the enemy is, and that's more useful to you when you're not engaged, when you have time to look and listen and be aware of where enemy fire is coming from. it kind of puts you in the role of armchair general, I guess, if you want to be fancy about it. But the point is that it gives you more command over the battlefield, because then you can say, we're going to move this way, we're going to move that way, command squad, let's do this, we need to support our infantry, etc., etc. It gives you control over the battlefield. And I should say, whichever force has assets that aren't in play is the one who controls the battlefield. Let me explain that a little bit more. Okay, so let's say the enemy has all of its assets to bear against you. Alright? Every single last thing. If you have assets that aren't allocated, that you don't necessarily need, you have control over the battlefield. Like, let's say let's say the enemy has all of its tanks out, all of its infantry out. Let's say you know exactly where all of the enemy's assets are. If you have assets that are not in play that you could utilize against this enemy force, then you are dutifully in control of the battlefield, unless the enemy is bringing to bear offensive power that is so overwhelming that you don't have any time to maneuver, which is usually not the case in every situation. Okay, so what about the objective now? Okay, so I dare you to rush your squad to the objective in any game mode at any time, just right off the bat. Just rush through. There's situations where that is totally feasible. Now, and I also don't mean objectives that the enemy is obviously nowhere near. I mean areas where the enemy is likely. So areas that haven't been dutifully scouted, where the enemy is... There's a high chance where they are in that area, but you don't know where they are. You haven't gone under first contact yet. You haven't really been able to update the map or update the other squads with enemy positions. Just go. Just rush in there. The thing is, if you do this, you'll all die, and you'll just completely blow your hand. Like, you're going to want the enemy to not be sure of the enemy force. Like, you want him to have some level of anxiety in terms of whatever force is advancing, especially whatever force is advancing, because whatever force is advancing, you're in a race against time. Now, I'm sure you have other resources at your disposal that you need to worry about. But your main thing is time, because you don't want the enemy to completely actualize your entire force all at once. Like, you're going to want them to have some doubts as to where you are. You're going to want them to be unaware of certain actions that you're doing against them. That's very important. Like, having the enemy in the dark in certain areas is so vitally important. I cannot stress it enough. You're going to want to use... I mean, some of these are obviously some, like, kind of advanced tactics, I should say. It might be a lot to ask from just a bunch of people in there, on the computer, playing a game that they think is fun. But, where possible, coordinate with your other squads and just try to ascertain some level of superiority in terms of your advances. And one of the greatest vectors of superiority, one of the greatest ways that you can gain superiority of the enemy, is if they don't know where the hell you are. And it may seem like it's always impossible for the enemy to be spotted or for the enemy to spot you. It might always seem like it's unlikely, but believe me, there's somebody in some squad somewhere on the enemy team that knows where you are, that has a general idea, and is at the time, or at that moment, currently letting his other teammates know and letting the squad leader know, hey, that's where the enemy is, or hey, that's where that guy is. And then if one guy's spotted, then he has a pretty general direction as to where the rest of the enemy force is, and well, it blows off your whole advance essentially. I'll give you an example. I was defending this trench line with this was in Post Scriptum, with a Bren gunner, and I basically immediately saw a massive enemy force advancing from the south, and all I needed to really tell him was, hey, swing the gun this way and kill them. That's what we did. Like, he didn't move conservatively at all. He didn't move silently. He didn't move prone. That's very important. Moving prone is vastly underrated. You don't know, like, the levels by which that increases your squad's and yourself's survivability rating is absolutely unprecedented, and people should be going prone way more often. But they were just blitzing the point at that point. And the thing is that while that is somewhat valuable, it would have been much more valuable and effective if they moved through a nearby forest. No, they were running towards the forest to advance. No, they should have been moving directly through the forest to our position. It would have been so much harder to see them. It would have been so much harder to actualize them with the Bren gun, which is what we did. And it would have been near impossible for us to suppress them, which we did. And we unfortunately lost that point because we didn't have adequate force multipliers, such as other squad members or machine guns or mortars. But by and all, we were able to defend that point for a lot longer than had it been expected of us, I should say. You have time to get to the objective. You have actually a lot more time to get to the objective usually than you might actually think. Now, it's what's in the way that should alarm you. Now, if your entire force is actualized immediately as they're moving to the objective, then you're going to waste a lot of valuable resources taking it. Now, I've been in a lot of situations where we had time, we could have used time, but we weren't moving strategically at all, so they were able to burn through our resources very, very quickly. Now, we just unfortunately weren't able to consolidate our forces in a very strategic way in order to make it so our losses were minimized. Our losses were maximized in that case, and then we ended up losing the game not because the time ran out, but because we just didn't have any more respawn points available. In order to maximize your effectiveness on the battlefield, you have to make actions against your enemy to exploit breaches or to promote breaches in their defenses in the case of you attacking. If you're defending, you can still do the same thing and poke holes in their advances to completely stop them, obviously. The actions that you're taking right now are stepping stones to that moment where you are able to breach the enemy and push them off the objective, or, completely halt and advance and destroy it. For now, the action that you're taking right now are to establish superiority over the enemy so that during that initial engagement, you can take out all of their force multipliers and diminish them so greatly to where they can't bring effective arms to bear against you. That's very important. You want to destroy the enemy's ability to make war. And the only way that you can effectively do that, in my opinion, is by going through the steps in this guide, such as making it so that your force is hard to detect, making it so that the exact number of your force is hard to detect, making it so that you do cover your squads and watch their flanks and advance with them and support their advances with, in the framework of these fire teams. In my opinion, I should say, because I'm not a massive expert, these are the methods that we can take in order to effectively do this. Okay guys, I'm going to use Roll20 now to sort of illustrate my point. It's going to be a little bit more free-flowing since I have to update them in real time, but alright, we got our standard squad here. This is going to be more accurate to Post Scriptum, but follow along. This 3 chevron one, this little mark right here, is going to be our squad lead, and this is the rest of his command squad right here. This little 2 chevron guy, this little corporal guy or whatever, is going to be the radioman, and this, you can kind of guess what the hell that is. That's the medic of the command squad. These are our point men. The point men's medic, the grenadier. I used a mark with this little grenade mark on this private mark. The private marks without marks are the 2 riflemen. This little target one right here is the marksman, and this one right here with the little machine gun turret thing is going to be the machine gunner. So let's say that you follow the other previous steps down to the first video, so everyone's properly organized and knows their role, and you've set up your MSP in the appropriate area or whatever, and you've coordinated with the rest of the squads to make sure that's actually the part that, the area rather that you want it to be in, and etc. And you guys are currently marching to your objective, which is right here, or you're marching to meet the enemy first. This could be the objective, and you could have been up to this point been totally unperturbed and advancing towards it or whatever. But let's say you're currently looking for the enemy to engage, or looking to gain superiority over the enemy, or just scouting for where the enemy is. I mean, this could just be a vantage point. The objective could be over here. I'm gonna mark with this arrow. The objective could be over in this direction or whatever. But let's say, for all intents and purposes, that this is close to the objective, or then this is an area or a vantage point that is nearby. So by now your pointmen, you should have ordered your pointmen rather to go to like a certain area to take ground and set up an area for a new rally. Let's say like right here or whatever. You know, they should be moving in formation. So what I usually like to tell them is that, hey, you know, riflemen cover ground from the machine gunner set up to fire along the flanks of the other advancing infantry, and marksmen stick around for tasking. You know, have the marksman maybe probably be over around here or something. It doesn't really matter. Well, I guess his positioning matters, but it's at this point that you really can't just tell them individually where to go. They have to practice some level of intuition and figure out for themselves, so they can maximize the effectiveness of their weapons, I should say. And yeah, like for now, like you guys, the guys are just capping ground. They're just moving, advancing along the side. No enemy contact so far. I'm going to use these little markers to detail where the enemy could be or where they are at the time. But yeah, right now, just advancing like before. You sit down and move fast or whatever. You're letting them know, hey, cover this ground, move this way, etc., etc. You know, you've been here for the rest of the video. You should know what I'm talking about by now. Now is the part that's kind of important. Your command squad is bringing up the rear. So right now, these guys are not in play. I'm just having them on the side right now. There's no rally, or there's no close rally. And your infantry have moved to the move fast and are currently moving up. So let's say the move fast was somewhere around here. They're taking positions. They're taking cover. Machine gun setting up right here. Marksman, you know. The other rifleman is sort of moving up with the other one or whatever. You guys can sort of get the idea. Bring up the rear with your command squad. Now you have some options, but I'm going to tell you where not to come from. Don't swing around in some crazy direction, come from this direction. There might be reasons why you might want to, but you don't have to necessarily go crazy with the whole covering the flanks and bringing up the rear thing. You can just come in the same direction generally, but your venue of approach might be just this direction instead of along the hedge, just right over here. You're bringing up the rear. You plop down your rally. Your radio's next to you. He's able to do that for you. Plop down the rally. I mean, let's say we just put it. Sorry, hold on. Let's say we just put it in these bushes over here, out of the way. You know, enemy can't necessarily see it, or at least since we don't know where the enemy is, we're gonna have to assume that they can't see it. But always put it in some place that is harder for them to see, like in a bush or whatever. You know, behind a tree, in a ditch, very important. Always be careful with ditches though, because what I've noticed is that like if the enemy finds your squad, like sort of moving from the ditch, they can just get behind and just pour fire downrange, especially if they got an automatic weapon, and that's just a nightmare, because he finds your rally and then he finds all the guys coming off the rally going in one direction down the ditch. I'm assuming you've probably been in situations like that before if you've played Post Scriptum and you've, you know, been in a squad where the rally is like in one of those irrigation ditches. But I digress. No enemy contacts for now. Rally is down. Time to make actions against the enemy. Okay, so as a squad lead, you're going to have to use your intuition again to judge where the enemy is. So, I mean, this is a pretty defensible area, so let's say the enemy is likely in this area, like, or in these buildings over here. Now, let's say this is sort of like a ranged defilade, I think it's like, sorry, a raised defilade or whatever. To maximize the effectiveness of your squad's movement, they shouldn't be engaging any enemy, especially if they see them at this point. They should be moving prone, going along the defilade, in cover, and getting in preparation for engaging the enemy. Because right now you're not in position. Your command squad's looking for a spot for the rally, or rather they're advancing to that spot with the rally, and they've just placed it. So from there, or right now, your squad should be getting in position to, move on the next move marker, or move on the next attack marker, or follow your next order. Okay, so your command squad is now in the battlefield. They're in play. They're From there. I mean, you have some venues, like I said. You can, if you wanted to, though I wouldn't recommend it because it just sort of, it doesn't give you every possible angle of approach. Like, it doesn't give you eyesight over the entirety of the battlefield when you move with your squad in its entirety. It only gives you a kind of an area of where the enemy generally is. And what I mean by that is, let's say the squad leader and the rest of the squad is like moving along this defilade. All you can really see is what's over here, and maybe what's behind if you're looking in that direction. It's good to maximize your sight ranges. So I like to move sort of askew from the squad. I've already iterated this before, but I'm also presenting it visually so you understand. It's important that you take a position to offer effective support in the case of a move. Let's say like here, darting from building to building. By now, the enemy, if they're in these buildings, would probably have been able to spot you by now. Especially if the space between these is as close as it appears here. Like if I were to actually use the ruler. Like, this is actually a fair amount of space away, but I mean, details, don't really worry about it. At this point, you should be relaying information constantly, doing your own sort of reconnaissance, having your radio, because like the thing is, like these two guys right here, they have binoculars, which is really good, and so do you. And they should be looking in this direction, they should be looking in this direction, they should be looking across the field over here. Very important, across the field over here, because if you have guys prone here and you're able to spot them, then you're able to let the machine gunner know that, hey, you have to move up. You're able to let the grenadier know that, hey, you're gonna, like, again, you're gonna have to judge the distance generally of where this is. This is about like if this is like a small general like area, like a road or whatever in Post Scriptum, that's probably like 50 or 60 meters away. Excuse me, you're able to let him know that, hey, 60 meters in this direction, or whatever meters in this direction, enemy here. Now, spotting the enemy doesn't automatically mean engage them. It only means engage when you say so, but again, chaos of battle, people kind of doing their own thing. So long as your squad knows what to shoot at and where to look in order to shoot, it's good. But let's say this is the most ideal situation ever, in that you've advanced and you spotted the enemy in these buildings or in this general area around these red dots, and, well, they haven't spotted you, let's say. Or they've spotted one guy here and they're engaging, or one guy here and they've engaging your squad. All it takes is for you to really just let them know that, hey, they're engaging me. But now we at the very least know where the enemy is. They're in these buildings. What now? Okay. I didn't necessarily want to get into squad tactics in this video, but I mean, you can kind of divine really what you should do. Suppressing fire from the machine gun, grenadier, get those grenades through the windows. Infantry, start getting fire on those windows as well. Let them know that we're here. Marksmen, start looking out as well. And then your squad, you don't necessarily need to be opening fire right now. Like, everybody doesn't need to absolutely be pin cushioning these buildings right now, because for one thing, that just lets everybody know where every aspect of your squad is. But well, I mean, it gets rid of that element of surprise, like that element of unilateral scouting that I was informing you about, where everyone is, or at least most of the squad is, in a cover position, inconspicuous from the enemy, and the enemy doesn't have a accurate understanding of the entirety of your forces, of the level of firepower and force that you have at your disposal. I'll give you another example. In a roadside defilade similar to this one, I was able to basically spot the entire platoon. I don't know why they were all in one area, but it was like half of the enemy forces all here. Now the thing about artillery is that like, hold on, let me just, sorry, let me just explain. Artillery in this case, in the case that I'm talking about here, it would have been it would have been perfect. And the thing is, we did use the artillery, and it was it was crazy effective. About artillery in games like this, it's really hard to necessarily judge where the enemy is if they're moving properly. So artillery on anywhere else that isn't like a major strong point is kind of ineffective, because usually the enemy is somewhat divided. Usually they are moving in this fashion to where, like, they've hidden their force multipliers. They have a the rest of their forces are also hidden, so that it's generally not as easy to discern their level. Like, discern how many that they have bearing at you. But in this case, especially, like in the example I'm referencing, it was pretty nuts how they just were all bunched up in this one area. We dropped artillery on them and just murdered them all. Uh, like, I think it was that game that we also, like, we were on the defending team. We also defended the objective, like the very first objective, the entire game. We destroyed them, and it was because their movements were just so obvious. It was unfortunate. But back to our little diarrhea here. From here, you're gonna want to maintain that element of surprise as long as possible. But if we've dictated that this is an area that we definitely want to take, obviously, in a couple of days, I'll come out with my squad tactics video, and then you can watch that. But yeah, from there, you just have to engage the enemy, take that point, take the position, utilize all the effective firing ranges from the fire teams that you have. The command squad should be checking out this direction and laying down fire in this direction if they need be, scouting in all these directions, over here, over here, over here, this way, obviously on this objective that you set as well. And just overall, just maximizing sight ranges and maximizing the survivability of your squad by giving them cover and by letting them know what's in front of them. This is the important thing. This is why you do this. Now, you could have also just had them hold here and had your squad push up this way as well, from here or from this direction or whatever. You could have had them go further south and check out what's more east or more south, and, well, they'd still have a general idea what's over here. You'd still be able to maintain your sights over here. But let's say the objective is this way or this way, you can move this way and cover their flanks as they take this little patch of housework, or these houses or whatever. Yeah, no, I mean, no, this is it. This is it. This is what I wanted to express as being important. The fact that the fire teams allow you to be a little bit more mobile, a little bit more centralized in your planning, and no, it just maximizes the survivability of your squad by making it so that if you're engaged in this position, not every single element of your force can be destroyed by one hail of bullets. And you're also able to find where that hail of bullets is coming from. Like, I mean, the suppression system in Post Scriptum is absolutely insane, because if your entire squad is suppressed, you can't do anything. There's nothing you're going to be able to do against it. If the suppression is coming from, say, this house right here going this way, though, and your command squad is right here, even more so if they're divided amongst if there's more defilates here, and your radio is able to spot, the radio right here is able to spot where that machine gun's coming from, and you're able to mark it. Let's say the marksman's not suppressed. He might be able to move this way, because generally I give them a little more independence, and he might be able to find where that machine gunner is, or that marksman, or whatever element's in here, and take him out. Having a machine gun is basically painting a massive target on your head, but if you're able to use it effectively, then it doesn't necessarily matter, because the rest of the enemy squad can start making actions against the squad that's here, moving this way, or he's able to call his buddies, and grenade. All it takes is a couple of grenades in this way, in this direction. A couple of like one guy with an MP40, and then, well, if the machine gun's suppressing them, then your whole story is over. Basically, your whole advance is completely destroyed. But thankfully, let's say they are moving in this direction, and there's nobody in these houses. Let's say these guys are over in whatever. They're off in the cut in some direction. Thanks to your squad being here as opposed to here, though somebody might have been able to spot them from here. Let's say you're actually able to spot an enemy force moving across the way over here. That's good, isn't it? Well, it is good, because if you're able to spot these guys, then your machine gunner can fire in this direction, even if this foliage is blocking his line of sight. If you let him know, hey, just shoot here, I mean, he's not going to say no. He's going to know. And if so long as you're sure that there's enemy over there, you can shoot. Then from there, you can have your command squad push up this way, take positions, say in this house or whatever, and get some fire down range. Let's say they're shacked up in these houses. You're able to let the rest of your squad know, hey, they're in these buildings over here as well. You can tell your grenadier to move up to this building as well. Or, I mean, again, your squad is semi-autonomous, or these fire teams are semi-autonomous, so they're going to have to utilize some level of intuition. Main thing is movement. You guys, I'm sure you guys get it by now. Main thing is movement. Establishing superiority against the enemy by moving, by calling out orders, by getting to positions that are advantageous. Moving to your first contact. That's the thing. This is first contact. Thanks to you moving in a way that was carefully planned, obviously, and done in a way that maximizes the... Well, it just makes it so that your squad is harder to see, and it makes it so that your force multipliers are hidden, and the overall number of your force is hidden. You're able to come from angles that the enemy might not have suspected, lay down fire, and also adequately inform the rest of your squad where to move in order to be effective against the enemy. I mean, well, yeah, that's it. That's it. Movement, concealment, utilizing your force multipliers effectively and keeping them concealed against the enemy so they don't get destroyed first, or rather the entirety of your squad doesn't get destroyed in one go, which is why we use the fire teams. It is, I mean, I say it's that simple, but this is what we want. This is the position that we want to be. This is where we want to be when we're engaging the enemy. In superior positions, flanking fire. Maybe there's flanking fire coming from this direction, because ideally if they're looking over here or even over here, then we can get flanking fire this way. Flanking fire, having advantages against them, having our rallies out of the way. Let's say instead of over here, we can put it maybe over here or whatever. If you've been watching the rest of this video, you kind of get it by now. Alright. Sorry if I was rambling during this part. This was kind of free-flowing. I didn't really have a script for this part because I wanted to just kind of let it kind of flow through and let you see more and kind of use your intuition as to what you could be doing here. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. This has been part 2 of my video on how to squad lead, making it to first contact. If you like this video, obviously share it, like it, show it to anybody else who maybe wants to be a squad lead or wants to squad lead in TAC shooters like this. And also consider joining Easy Company. I'll post a link in the description and I'll have it flash on the screen here as well. You've probably seen some of the servers that they have, especially on Post Scriptum. If you've noticed that they are heavily populated or there's usually a long queue, if you donate to their Patreon, you actually are able to get reserved slots that let you join basically instantly. And that's always useful if you don't feel like waiting, like me, when you have to stream, like me, when you have to wait 30 minutes in order to get in the game so you can stream a damn game, which has happened before and was very embarrassing. You can just get in instantly. You can only takes I think the base tier is like $5 a month. You can get in on the action instantly and play with the community that is genuinely dedicated to making this game as fun as possible. Believe me, I can't give out too many details, I'll say, but Easy Company has been working with the devs of Post Scriptum before, and I think work like that will genuinely continue, and we're really gonna make this game really popular. It's not very popular. In fact, often I'm usually the only one or three guys streaming it, except for Digby sometimes. But yeah, I'm sure you guys get the idea. All right, thank you so much. This has been Karl Franz of Easy Company, otherwise known as Salty Sea Gaming. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.